Foreign nationals are continuously denied access to healthcare in South Africa. Illnesses such as TB and HIV will remain a major concern. The remarks come amid reports to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation status. The Commission says this is not only unethical and unlawful, but also inconsistent with the country's obligations under both domestic and international human rights law. The SAHRC Commissioner Sandra Mokwasha has identified systematic failures as the biggest contributor to this dilemma.
Should we not address and provide medical health care to everyone? Issues such as HIV will not be addressed, and TB, which are the most problematic issues in South Africa. So we will see an increase in that. And the issue is then we really need all governments, and specifically in the SADC region, to have a conversation about access to healthcare in South Africa and how do we then navigate and answer that so that we don't have vulnerable members of the community battling it out for limited resources at hospitals.
The bail application of 12 South African National Defence Force Special Task Force members is expected to resume at the Randburg Magistrate Court in Johannesburg this morning. The group is facing charges related to the 2023 murder of Hawks Specialist Investigator Lieutenant Colonel Franz Matiba. They're also facing charges relating to the kidnapping and disappearance of an Ethiopian national and alleged ISIS leader Abdallah Abadiga in December 2022. Matiba was reportedly investigating the disappearance of Abadiga when he was gunned down in August 2023. He was shot while driving on the N1. UN officials say armed gangs have further tightened their grip on Haiti, this despite efforts of police and a Kenya-led international force. The Assistant Secretary General of the Americas, Miroslav Jenka, said Haiti's capital Port-au-Prince was paralyzed and isolated. He highlighted a surge of human rights violations, including sexual violence and allegations of people trafficking for their internal organs. The BBC's Will Grant reports.
The Haitian government and security forces have struggled to even remotely wrestle back control of the capital Port-au-Prince from the powerful drug gangs who have the city in their grip. Even the UN-backed deployment of hundreds of Kenyan police officers has failed to make any significant progress in improving the security situation. Now, one of the top UN officials for the Americas has set out the extent of the problem in stark language to the Security Council. Miroslav Jenka, the Assistant Secretary for the Americas, warned that Haiti faces the real possibility of the total collapse of the state presence in the capital unless the international community acted decisively.
Now, this week on Channel Africa Conversations podcast, host Peter Ndoro speaks to Ambassador Nkosinati George Utwala about his new book and the tough times he faced during the struggle to liberate South Africa. Utwala says he was tortured whilst many others died during the apartheid era.
Torture on its own created quite a lot of issues for me, and I guess a lot of other people. I'm but just an individual in this whole trip, you know. I'm just an individual reflecting what happened to a whole range of other people. The others did not survive. Others took a dive. They flew from the 10th floor of John Foster Square to their deaths. I'm talking about Bomethu Mabelane, etc., etc. These are all people who died. So I'm saying I'm fortunate that I survived it.
Now be sure to catch the latest episode of Channel Africa Conversations on our YouTube page at Channel Africa 1. Now recapping on your top stories, the former Gabonese President Ali Bongo Ondimba has appeared before two investigative judges in Paris this week as part of a legal process he initiated following allegations of torture, abduction and detention by an organized group. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective. The future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that's
Channel Africa, and thank you so much for being a part of this incredible place, this incredible space that gives us the African perspective. To you and yours, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a beautiful Thursday morning, and once again, we give you a beautiful adventure of news, views, and entertainment from that African perspective. Thank you to the morning team, Asanda Beda and Peter Ndoro, kickstarting our morning on Africa Rise and Shine. But it's now 7 minutes past 9 Central Africa time, and it's time for On the Move with myself, Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama, with you for the next 3 hours, all the way until 12 p.m. Central Africa time. We always have lots to chat about, so do tap in on www.channelafrica.co.za, on our audio bouquets, DSTV channel 802 and OpenView HD channel 628, and of course the SABC Plus app as well. I'm really interested in the conversations of today because they really are intriguing, and they teach us a little bit more about what we see and what we do. The first hour of the show, so there's this speed train in Johannesburg, the only speed train in South Africa. So it's called the Gau train, and when you go there to the Gau train, when you're waiting for the train or you just got off, there are seats there, but they're incredibly uncomfortable. Those seats, you can't actually sit. It's like two steel rods slanted at an angle, so you can't actually sit flat on it. You sort of just have to lean on it with your bottom, and you're always sort of sliding off, so you have to have your feet planted in and make sure that you're okay. So you're not actually sitting, you're just leaning on it sort of. And it's also part of a phenomenon that we're seeing more increasingly in African cities. This is a phenomenon that's widely known in more Western cities, and it's called hostile architecture. It's also known as defensive or exclusionary design, and refers to urban design strategies that are intended to control or restrict behavior in public spaces, often targeting marginalized groups such as the homeless, street vendors, or youth. So essentially what they're saying is that you guys cannot be here for extended periods of time, and this architecture does not allow the homeless to maybe sleep in that space, a street vendor to set up in that place, etc. So we're going to be unpacking this particular phenomenon a little bit further and seeing its rise in urban cities here on the African continent. We're going to be taking a look at it from the homelessness perspective with Mpeti Marojele, owner and founder of the Mpeti Marojele and Associates Architectural Studio. So finding out about the architecture of this particular design strategy. And Stephen Underwood, Communications and Fundraising Officer at U-Turn Homeless Ministries. Then we go into our Becoming feature. It's one of my favorite here because it speaks about the human experience and different things that we go through. So on the African continent, initiation rites or coming of age ceremonies have long marked a sacred transition from childhood to adulthood, maybe from singleness to marriage, and many other rites of passage that we go through. But today, Africa is obviously urbanizing quite quickly and raising global citizens. So we're actually, moving a little bit away from some of those cultural rites of passage, and sometimes coming in with more urban or modern strategies. So we're going to be taking a look at that, rites of passage between the cultural and the modern, and whether or not there are rites of passage that exist outside of our traditional frameworks. We'll be chatting to Professor Simphiwe Sisanti, a South African academic whose work intersects African philosophy, education, journalism, and cultural rights, as well as Mbalie Gogo Nokanya Kumalo, who's a traditional healer, to chat to us about this. We wrap up with our family and parenting corner, taking a look at what is called motherhood loneliness. What exactly is that? And maybe you can, also think about yourself as a mother and think, well, it's quite a lonely journey. We'll be unpacking that with Tata Daisy Nyawira, a counseling psychologist from Kenya, in our final hour.
Shoo, that's a mouthful. We're looking forward to all of those great topics today. Definitely, it's going to be an adventure as we venture into to all these different subject matters. Remember, you can find us on our WhatsApp number +2763 406 9126. Another way to engage with us is if you can find us on our different social media. Remember, our main handle is at Channel Africa 1. It's actually the number 1 at the end of the phrase Channel Africa. So don't be shy. Join us on X, join us on TikTok, join us on Instagram, as well as on YouTube. And on Facebook, we simply titled Channel Africa. Hey, it's going to be a good day. Let's go.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo yanataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Africa, Palesa and Benjamin, fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
If you live in an African inner city, you'll notice that there are things that have changed over the past couple of years. I mentioned there's a speed train here in Johannesburg called the Gau train, and the seats there are very uncomfortable. It's literally just 3 steel rods slanted at an angle that you actually can't sit flat on top of. You sort of have to just lean on top of it and use your legs to balance, because you can't actually have a full seat on those seats. So it's almost like, hey, you're waiting and you're just going to run into the train. There's not actually any time to have a proper seat there. Also, think about bus stations. Bus stations used to have a full bench and, of course, a canopy where you can sit and wait for the bus while it's coming, and then, be sheltered from the sun and the rain in case it comes. But now if you go to a bus stop, sometimes there are no seats at all, or the seats are just like quite weird, right? They're not really meant for sitting for a long period of time, and you can't really just relax and sit there for a while. Even the canopies are gone in some of the bus stations. Well, it's actually a phenomenon that's called hostile architecture. It's also known as defensive or exclusionary design, and refers to urban design strategies that are intended to control or restrict behavior in public spaces. And this often targets marginalized groups like people who are homeless, like street vendors or the youth. And this phenomenon might be widely studied in Western cities, but it is increasing in African cities like Johannesburg, Cape Town, Nairobi or Lagos. And in these rapidly urbanizing environments, hostile architecture manifests through its features like anti-homeless spikes, segmented public benches and restricted access zones. We're further unpacking this particular phenomenon, and we have joining us on the line Stephen Underwood, Communications and Fundraising Officer at U-Turn Homeless Ministries, as well as Mpeti Morojele, owner and founder of Mpeti Morojele and Associates Architectural Studio. Thank you so much for joining us, both of you. I'm going to start with you, Mpeti. From an architectural perspective, we're seeing these small changes, but we didn't really know why these are happening. Why does hostile architecture even exist?
Good morning. Good morning to the listeners. I think architecture as a whole is an instrument, a tool that is used, as you said, to kind of suggest behaviors in the public space. Some of it can be done in a good way, and some of it can indeed be done in a hostile way. In our countries, in Southern Africa, a lot of the architecture has been kind of driven by our history of apartheid, where some people were said to be proper citizens of the city, i.e. the white people, and black people generally were supposed to only come in to work and leave the city. And our cities were designed like that. You can see the width of the pavements, you can see the level of accessibility or non-accessibility, and a host of all other instruments that architects use to direct this behavior.
So what is important when putting together the architecture of a city, and why are we seeing this hostile architectural design strategy coming in more and more in our African cities?
I think our African cities, they say the more a city, an economy progresses, the more you lose the community. So we're losing the sense of community because our cities are becoming more so-called progressive from an economics point of view.
Yeah.
And what that means is that the cities are now being driven by decisions around money and around economics of making money. So what that means is that the exclusivity then becomes important, so that you can almost design out the poor and the underclass. And you create these zones where, they become exclusive. And it's a way of kind of attracting, even at an international level, to attract international capital.
Yeah.
To create these exclusive zones.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting because I still want us to describe this hostile architecture. Is it deliberate or is it indirect? And what would the difference between hostile architecture be when it comes to gentrification as well? Or do the two things play hand in hand?
They kind of play hand in hand. For example, not to mention too closely certain areas, but if you go to the central business district now, which is Sandton, you'll find that a lot of the buildings there, you can't just walk in from the street.
Mm-hmm.
They have no face onto the street. They're not very welcoming. You have to drive into the building. You have to have an appointment. The edges looking onto the street are all blank. So they're really.
So there's no pavement as well, like
out.
pavement to walk on that structure.
That pavement is very small, so they're really designed to say keep out of here, unless you have an appointment. And it's a very car-driven kind of planning, which means that people who are street-based find it very difficult to navigate.
Yeah,
there are no benches, there are no kind of amenities in the street. Just small signs. There are no trees that make it comfortable for you to walk. It's really designed for cars, and you can feel it, as opposed to different kinds of cities.
All right, I'll need us to take a break, and I'd love after the break to bring Stephen into this conversation, because this is not just an architectural strategy, but it is quite, based on, those people who are marginalized and they're targeted through these strategies. How does this affect the homeless? We'll find out a little bit later after the break. We're still speaking to Mpeti Morujele and Stephen Underwood about hostile architecture, both from an architectural perspective in the cities, but also finding out about the anti-homelessness of it all.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Get set and be ready to go. On the move with Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama.
All right, so let's continue this very interesting conversation. This term, hostile architecture, which is a design of cities that excludes certain types of people, marginalized groups such as the homeless, street vendors, or the youth. We're speaking to Mpeti Morojele, who's the owner and the founder of the Mpeti Morojele and Associates Architectural Studio. We also have Stephen Underwood, who is a communications and fundraising officer at U-Turn Homeless Ministries. Stephen, let's talk a little bit about some of the work that you do at U-Turn Homeless Ministries. What are you noticing when it comes to hostile architecture? What does it look like for you, especially as someone who works on the ground with the homeless?
Yeah, thanks, Benjamin. Morning, Palesa. Just to get back to your question of whether this hostile architecture is actually deliberate, I can say that it certainly is deliberate approach. Hete referred to it from a sort of corporate architecture point of view, but I can even speak from a government perspective. I serve on local ward council, and there are certainly measures taken to ensure that public spaces are not occupied by people living on the street. So that's the deliberate decision to erect fences or concrete bollards or spikes and things like that in places where people do reside. So it is definitely a deliberate strategy. It's definitely something that occurs particularly in urban areas. I have a colleague who's from Limpopo, and he said the first time he experienced homelessness was when he moved to the city, because in his village that spirit of Ubuntu, of caring for one another, is so prevalent that you just don't have homelessness in that area. So coming to a city, you suddenly encounter homelessness. And yes, there are definitely strategies employed by corporates, by government, to try to make sure that homelessness is contained. And one of those measures is through fencing, through concrete bollards, through cobblestones, spikes, anything that makes a flat surface sort of bumpy and coarse, makes it harder to live on. I do have to say, from a balancing perspective, though, that one of the main goals of governance is making sure that public spaces are free and open for the public. And when folk live on the street and they reserve a public space exclusively for their own by erecting tents and things like that, they are also infringing on governance bylaws. So it's really a catch-22 situation where governments are trying to keep their public spaces open, but people living on the streets kind of have nowhere to go and are just looking for a place to lay their head. And they're excluded at every point. And that exclusion doesn't just extend to architecture. It's also the welcome they receive, let's call it, in any environment. So anytime someone living on the street is in an area, there are neighborhood watchers targeting them, there are security targeting them, there's police targeting them. They never feel at any moment that they can rest, that they can relax in an area, because there's always someone or something in terms of architecture trying to push them away and push them out of the environment. And you can imagine what that does for someone's mental health and for their development.
That's so interesting that you say that, because it has kind of a resemblance of apartheid kind of regulations, right? Maybe there's no sign that says do not enter. Maybe there's no signs that say this is an area of segregation. It's only meant for these kinds of people. But there is probably like a historical context to what we're seeing with this brutal architecture.
Yeah, I think everything in South Africa is still shaped, as Mpeti originally said, by the apartheid history. And because homelessness is predominantly affected by that, it can be seen as furthering that agenda. There are white people also living on the street, and I think in this case it's almost a class exclusion. But yes, it's definitely an approach of exclusionary tactics to try to keep public spaces open. And I do agree with Mpeti that it is driven by largely a capitalist mentality of wanting to attract tourism, wanting to attract foreign investment, wanting to keep businesses operating in free and open public spaces. But again, I think we do have to reflect on our political system, that is a system that does help create jobs and grow the economy. So it is a difficult one. There is kind of a middle ground we have to look at. And I think that is, while governments are busy installing hostile architecture, what are they actually spending on development for people living on the street? Are they also putting money towards building shelters, to building pathways out of homelessness? And so rather than just thinking about exclusionary ways to design our cities and spend money, it's better to think of inclusionary and developmental spends, because homelessness has a massive cost to society, and that cost is borne through this type of architectural installations. It's borne through the security measures that I mentioned earlier. It's borne through the increased cost in healthcare. And yeah, so money needs to be invested in development, in creating more shelters and more affordable housing, and just generally trying to recover from those exclusionary apartheid economic practices.
You know, I love that you mentioned that there needs to be a middle ground, and you speak about the pros and cons on each side. Yes, the homeless are also the public, and they need to take up some spaces, but they also cannot infringe on the rights of, everybody else within those spaces. Betty, I'm going to bring it to you and say, let's take a look at a utopic world. Of course, I know, architecture, people and architectures, they make sure that they, fulfill the brief that they're given, maybe by the government, the city, the municipalities, to build the city in a particular way. But in a utopia, what other spaces could be put in place outside of, the public spaces, where there can still be a place for homeless people? Because it's not like when there's, hostile architecture, the homeless just disappear. They are still homeless and they still are in need.
Wow, utopia. I think if we're going to talk utopia, we have to talk about the values of society.
Yeah.
And the primary one in this case would be, do we believe that we all have equal access to the city? And once we establish that as a value, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, whatever your circumstances, then we can start to have a conversation about how do we allow equal access for everybody. At the moment, I think everything is based on a value system, and our value system is really quite classist. Our value system is really about throwing out those who are at the lowest rungs of society. But in the case where we did have that kind of trying to create inclusive cities, I think there have been attempts, even in Johannesburg, there have been attempts, and in a lot of other cities, as to how you do that. A lot of African cities, because they did not have this apartheid planning to that extent, you'll find that in the middle of Nairobi, you've got shacks next to a Hilton hotel. In Ethiopia, next to the market, you'll find a Sheraton. So those are much more inclusive, whether by design or by default, because there wasn't this apartheid segregation. And now, ironically, they're trying to segregate and clear out shacks and make their cities look more like, kind of Western cities. So it is a very complex and complicated thing. But I think there are measures that can kind of talk to that value system of making cities more inclusive. In Joburg, some of the markets, for example, were designed to try and recognize street vending, for example.
Sure.
What level of success, I don't know.
Absolutely. Stephen, let's wrap it up. We've run out of time. There's so many angles that we could touch on here. But in terms of wrapping up, just in a minute, what do you think is the way forward here?
I think government needs to look at inclusionary spend in terms of more shelters, more housing. I agree with Mpete. Proximity is very important. It's not separating rich and poor, but building inclusive spaces that have social housing alongside, luxury apartments. That proximity allows us to meet and understand one another and actually help each other towards a better society.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for helping us understand what hostile architecture and how it actually excludes, especially those who are homeless, and how there is also that class distinction that characterizes the nature of hostile architecture. Thank you to Mpeti Morojele, who's the owner and founder of the Mpeti Morojele and Associates Architectural Studio. Thanks as well to Steve Underwood, Communications and Fundraising Officer at U-Turn Homeless Ministries. Thank you both for your time.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Well, that's how we wrap up that conversation. What's your take on how we design our cities? Hostile architecture, have you heard of it before? Have you noticed it? +2763 406 9126. Let's quickly move on and get our latest sports update. It's 9:31 Central African Time.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And a very good morning from the sports desk. I am Musibu Di Makura with your latest sports news at the Sawa. So the Australian government has confirmed it will contribute $2.25 billion towards $7.1 billion US dollars cost to building the venues for the 2032 Brisbane Olympic Games, clearing the way for the start of construction. So Queensland's taxpayers as well as private finance will provide the balance of the money for the 17 new and upgraded venues for the Summer Olympic Games under the funding deal announced by the state as well as federal governments earlier on today. Now, Brisbane was awarded hosting rights for the Games in 2021, but political wrangling over the venues meant the final plans were not decided until March of this year. So the organising committee chief executive officer Andrew Levers welcomed Thursday's announcement as a significant shift in forward momentum. The main stadium, which is estimated to cost around $4.7 billion US dollars, will be built in the city of Victoria Park, and the seating there is 60,000 US dollars, 60,000 seater stadium during the Olympics, and 3,000 more for the Australian rules football as well as cricket games after 2032. So the new aquatic centre, meanwhile, to host the swimming in 2032 will be built nearby at an estimated cost of about 750,000 US dollars. On the continent now, with the eyes of the continent firmly fixed on East Africa, Kenya has made a bold statement of intent by officially handing over the refurbished Kasarani Stadium to the local organising committee ahead of the 2024 Total Energies African Nations Championship Chan tournament. Now, the stadium, which has undergone extensive renovations, will not only serve as Kenya's primary venue, but also host the final match of this year's competition on the 30th of August. Now, the symbolic handover was conducted by Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Salim Mvura, who said the move marked a critical milestone in the country's journey towards hosting the 8th edition of the Chan tournament. Now, the Moi International Sports Kasarani Stadium, popularly known as Kasarani, will host all Group A matches involving the host Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Morocco, Angola, as well as Zambia. Harambee Stars, under South African head coach Benny McCarthy, will begin their campaign at the same venue against the DR Congo on Sunday, the 3rd of August. Now, the Chan tournament will be co-hosted by Kenya, Uganda, as well as Tanzania, running from the 2nd until the 30th of August. While former Football Association of Zambia President Kalusha Bwalia has been appointed the Vice Chairperson of the Zambian Football Association National Team Technical Subcommittee. Kalusha Bwalia, regarded as one of Zambia's finest footballers, brings a wealth of experience both on and off the pitch. Meanwhile, other legends of the game appointed to the National Team Technical Committee include Kenneth Malitoli, the veteran coach Denny Kabwe, as well as the former Zambian national soccer team coach Patrick Piri. The committee is expected to provide key technical advice as well as oversight for the development as well as the performance of all Zambia's national men's and women's football teams. Further field now, former Bayern Munich winger Leroy Sané expects the German Giants to hold their own against PSG at the quarterfinals of the ongoing FIFA Club World Cup when the two teams meet this coming Saturday. Sané made his comments just before he left the Bayern camp to complete his move to Galatasaray in the Turkish Super League, having spent 5 years in the Bundesliga under various coaches. Now, Bayern thrashed Flamengo 4-2 at the Hard Rock Stadium Stadium in Miami, Florida, to book their spot in the quarterfinals. Sun is now confident they can beat the current European champions in the hope that Bayern can lift the title in the USA.
I think football, so it doesn't matter at the end. You always want to play against the best team, always one of the best teams. I think this is where the pressure comes. We are all excited about it. So yeah, no matter who's the opponent, we're looking forward to it and go step by step.
Now, the ex-Manchester City attacker also pointed that Paris Saint-Germain were no slouches, having also taken Inter Miami apart, beating the host side 4-0 to qualify for the quarterfinals.
Team. I think everyone saw what they did the last six months, especially of the last season. They won the Champions League, and it will be an interesting game, I think, for everyone to watch. And let's see who's the better one, and hopefully Bayern.
So for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email. That's to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Alternatively, give us a call. The line to call is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Interracial relationships. And now you are based in the States and you are married to a beautiful white woman, white lady.
I learned that, for us in our culture, we literally can speak our mind. I remember when we started dating and whatnot, and, she picked up like a little bit of weight. And me, I was like, oh, wow, you must be happy in this relationship because look at you. You look great. You're even picking up some weight. And she got really, really offended. And it took I think it was about a couple of hours before I could realize that, because I could tell that she was off after that. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. Until later when I was talking to her, I'm like, you were really, really off today. And then she expressed that, because you're telling me that I'm picking on some weight. And I'm like, in my culture, when you are gaining some weight, it means you're happy. Yes. So that's what I was trying to imply.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
Thank you for that sports update, Musibudi. Let's keep things moving with Chanduko Ligege, who has our latest business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Palesa. Good morning. U.S. President Donald Trump will host leaders from 5 African nations in Washington next week to discuss commercial opportunities. Trump will host leaders from Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal for a discussion and lunch at the White House on the 9th of July. The Trump administration has axed U.S. foreign aid for Africa as part of a plan to curb spending it considered wasteful and not aligned with Trump's America First policies. It says it wants to focus on trade and investment and to drive mutual prosperity. Climate change poses a major threat to food security in Mozambique, with small-scale farmers, particularly women and the youth, struggling due to inadequate farming knowledge and lack of market access. This, according to Francisco Nahale, the country manager of global NGO Solidaridad, and the organization focuses on transforming supply chain in agriculture in more than 50 countries. The NGO, together with the Heineken Africa Foundation and various organizations, has launched a project promoting regenerative agriculture for sustainable livelihoods in Mozambique. Nahale says this program aims to improve climate resilience for more than 4,000 farmers in the country's capital, Maputo.
With focus of empowering at least 60% of women and 30% of youths. And we also expect to benefit or impact about 20,000 community members indirectly. This program will achieve this promoting regenerative agriculture practice by improving the soil health and crop yields.
The Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund has approved the third review of Ethiopia's $3.4 billion loan program, unlocking access to $262.3 million in financing for the East African nation as the country continues debt restructuring talks. Ethiopia and IMF staff reached a staff-level agreement on the 30th of May, citing strong results from the first year of the program, which aims to stabilize Ethiopia's economy amid ongoing debt restructuring negotiations with official creditors and bondholders. The approval comes as Ethiopia and its official creditor committee, co-chaired by France and China, finalized a memorandum of understanding on debt restructuring. Kenya is planning to privatize some state assets via initial public offerings in order to bring in more private sector investment. This was mentioned by President William Ruto at the London Stock Exchange. The Kenyan government is planning to start with listing the Kenya Pipeline Company via an IPO on the Nairobi Securities Exchange this year. Joey Lihodi has more.
President Ruto also says that well-functioning domestic capital markets could reduce reliance on external debt. Kenya has been seeking new sources of funding since deadly nationwide protests last summer forced it to pursue austerity measures and scrap planned tax hikes worth more than $2.68 billion. Separately, at the Africa Debate event yesterday, Ruto said that following shocks such as U.S. President Donald Trump's elimination of USAID this year, Kenya is working to rely on its own resources and private investments rather than resources the country does not have control over.
South Africa's youth unemployment crisis continued to deepen, with a staggering 62.4% of those aged 15 to 24 now without work. But amidst these grim figures, a story of hope is emerging from the private sector. Concentric South Africa is making a tangible difference through its skills development and leadership programs, transforming lives and offering a pathway to employment for hundreds of young South Africans. Director at Concentric South Africa, Jason Locke, says they have the ability to create positive business outcomes for the youth.
The youth of South Africa is absolutely brimming with potential. You know, Concentrics is a great learning organisation. We've got the ability to help unlock that potential to create really positive business outcomes for our international. So getting great outcomes for the country in terms of one of the biggest challenges that it currently faces. Unlike traditional hiring strategies, our approach really focuses on providing opportunities for those from underrepresented communities. And what we're wanting to do there is remove the barriers to entry that they face.
Now let's shift our focus to financial indicators at this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 532, Botswana 13 Pula 14, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 47, Zambia 23 Kwacha 96. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 Real 45, Russia 78 rubles 72, India 85 rupee 63, China 7 yuan 16, South Africa 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,359, platinum at $1,405 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $68.63 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Have you been struggling to find Channel Africa?
Oh yes, where can I find you guys?
Well, you are in luck.
Warning, radioactive zone detected.
Listen to the African perspective on our brand new SABC Plus app. Download the fresh and easy to use app from sabcplus.com or the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Or just command your phone to find SABC Plus on your phone and check out all this good stuff. And that's where you will find Channel Africa, the African perspective. Oh yes, this is fresh and easy. 9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the Move with Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama. Speaks to Africa in its own voices. English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices. English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that...
This is Waxy K. This one is titled Buera. Beautiful music from Malawi. Malawi, stand up. The station is for you and, of course, for all of us here on the continent and the world over, as long as you love the African perspective and you love this incredible continent that we are in. We're speaking about hostile architecture, and it is a phenomenon that means that there are, deliberate architectures in our inner cities that do not allow for homeless people, street vendors to be a part of those spaces. And I'm glad that our guest Stephen, who works with a lot of homeless people, understands that or speaks from both ends to say, yeah, homeless people are also members of the public and they do have every right to also occupy those spaces like we all do within our inner cities. But it's important for it to also be done in a way that doesn't infringe on the rights of all of us. But I am so worried about them because it seems like we don't see the homeless as people, right? Especially if there are deliberate ways to sort of move them out, simply because, our cities should be there to make money. Our cities should be there to attract economic improvement. There's a huge classism issue that is taking place that's also being a part of our African cities, which is, as Africans, we're not exactly classist in nature, but we are becoming more and more like that because we do want our economies to rise. We do want sort of a global citizenry spaces where people feel free to come and spend in the cities and, grow the economy. But it is still important to find ways to accommodate those who are homeless because they are part of our communities and they should be a part of our lives as well, and not always been seen as those who should be pushed away. But if there is money for hostile architecture, there should in place also be money to house those who are homeless, to create spaces for street vendors, to create economic opportunities for street vendors and the youth so that they are also a part of the economy and part of all the spaces that are meant for all of us. What do you think about that conversation? I'm actually interested to find out if you have noticed any changes in your city where you are on the African continent or even anywhere in the world. What are some of those changes you can identify now and say, yeah, I think this is hostile architecture? I've noticed the bus stops, as I've said, how those have changed. I've noticed public parks and how those have changed. Public parks don't have a lot of benches anymore. Now, public parks here in Johannesburg and in parts of South Africa that I've noticed have like gym equipment, but not really places where you can sit permanently and enjoy. Obviously, the grass is still there, so that's amazing. But imagine a cold winter night on grass. Let us know at Channel Africa 1. That's where we're having these conversations on all of our social media platforms. It's 9:51 Central Africa time.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. If you are an upcoming artist looking to showcase your music to a wider audience, or just looking to promote your music on the radio, we can help. But there are a few things you can do to increase your chances of success. 1. Send your music to music@channelafrica.co.za. 2. We require the following information to help you best: your label, your ISRC code, title of the song, performer, composer, publisher, author, language, genre. These are the things we would like to compose your musical bio. 3. Listen to Channel Africa play your music on the radio. The perfect soundtrack for your day. With Channel Africa and your music, you will never be bored because we play your music. Experience the best African music on Channel Africa, the African perspective. The rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. Speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. more than just a broadcaster. Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future.
55 Central African Time, celebrating Africa with its music. That is the wonderful Soweto, and that is by Victony and Tempo, taking us to our second hour just in a few minutes' time, where we'll be having our Becoming feature. I love our Becoming feature because we're all becoming, whether you like it or not. You're going to end up being whatever your future holds for you. There's no choice. It's either you're going into the right direction or you're going to fall into the traps of not really becoming the best that you can be. And that's what we want to talk about when it comes to becoming, because becoming is something different when you are an African, right? I feel like there's so many pressures when we are African. And also there's so many kind of labels that are imposed on us as Africans. And most importantly, there are unique challenges that we face here on the African continent. And at times you have a vision in your mind, and there's something that is actually a hope and a dream that you want to become, but there's certain things that society actually imposes on you that you have to actually overcome. And that's why we do our Becoming feature. We want to do becoming in a different sense when it comes to this particular conversation we're having today. We're looking at rites of passage. That's going to be an interesting one, because rites of passage look different for urban and rural individuals on the African continent. If you're even outside of the continent, having a Pan-African experience, your rites of passage look completely different. So we're going to be looking at it from various ways. Some of us are rooted in tradition. Some of us are actually going into rites of passages that are more modern and not necessarily rooted in any one culture, but can be very nuanced in itself. And that's also very valid, that your rite of passage is as valid as someone who's more traditional if you are someone who's more urban as an African.
That's true, because we are, always sort of, like you said, we're always becoming, and we have various big points in our lives where we are transitioning into something. Yeah. And there are ways in various traditional cultures where those are, made a spectacle, where they are, really respected and taken through in a very traditional way. But so many of us now live here in the cities. Yeah. So many of us now are urbanized, and it sometimes can feel like we are removed from our cultures, or we don't have like formal rites of passage. But we don't actually realize that there's so many informal ways in our own urban senses, in our modern senses, that we are still having rites of passage, but we're not really identifying them as such because they're not cultural or traditional.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. Sometimes people think that the traditional overweighs the more modern way of actually going through a rite of passage. Yeah. Like, I know that just having a son is a rite of passage for me. Yes. Just like it's kind of like a big thing. I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm having different conversations with the men in my life, and even how my son is baptizing me every single day with his costs of nappies and all these things that I have to be responsible for. It's a rite of passage by itself. But, that doesn't mean that it's any different to someone who's actually going through an acknowledgement of being a father in a traditional sense. You know, we all have different ways that we're expressing our growth. So that's going to be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to that one. So stay with us in the next hour of the show. We're going into our Becoming feature. If you have any rites of passage that you have passed through, whether cultural or you just assume they are because it's modern, like, something here in South Africa that that we called the matric dance or the prom in other places. That is a rite of passage. It's informal, but it's actually becoming more and more putting a stronghold into our own cultural systems as modern people.
How we dress, how the lead up to that particular day, what that day actually means.
Right. I remember last year my son had a matric dance and it was a huge event, called my entire close family. It is a rite of passage and we all wanted to be there to witness it. So it might not have been him going to the mountain like people do in some traditions,
like for circumcision
or initiation. However, it was a huge rite of passage for all of us. It's 10 a.m. Central Africa time. We're going into that second hour conversation. But for now, let's get our latest news update with Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Palesa. Looking at your top stories, the former Gabonese president testifies and Thailand king swears in new cabinet. The latest news, greetings to our listeners. The former Gabonese President Ali Bongo Ondimba appeared before two investigative judges in Paris this week as part of a legal process he initiated following allegations of torture, abduction and detention by an organized group. Ondimba's complaint, lodged with full civil party status, stems from events surrounding the military takeover that removed him from power in 2023. The French judiciary's involvement points to the growing international dimension of the case, particularly given Bongo's long-standing ties with France and his dual nationality links through family. General Bryce Oligui Nguema, who was officially sworn in as president in April this year, dismissed the claims in March, insisting there had been no instance of torture or abuse. The Human Rights Commission in South Africa has expressed concern at reports that some healthcare facilities are denying treatment to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation status. The Commission is also disturbed that some people are preventing undocumented foreign nationals from accessing medical healthcare facilities. The Commission says such practices are not only unethical and unlawful, but also inconsistent with South Africa's obligation under both domestic and international human rights law. Human Rights Commissioner Sandra Mokwasha explains.
The Constitution provides all those who are within the Republic of South Africa with access to healthcare, including emergency healthcare. Therefore, the treatment of foreigners, whether documented or undocumented, by preventing them from accessing healthcare services is unconstitutional and violates not only the Constitution but other laws in South Africa. Furthermore, South Africa has international obligations in respect of providing access to healthcare to all within its borders.
The bail application of 12 South African National Defence Force Special Task Force members is expected to resume at the Randburg Magistrate Court in Johannesburg this morning. The group is facing charges related to the 2023 murder of Hawk Specialist Investigator Lieutenant Colonel Franz Matiba. They are also facing charges relating to the kidnapping and disappearance of Ethiopian national and alleged ISIS leader Abdallah Abadiga in December 2022. Matiba was reportedly investigating the disappearance of Abadiga when he was gunned down in August 2023. Thailand's king is due to swear in a new cabinet that will see a third person in a week take on the role of prime minister. Phumtham Wechayachai is also acting premier as he outranks a colleague who filled the post for only a day. The BBC's Jonathan Heder reports.
Many Thais will be relieved to see such an experienced pair of hands in the Prime Minister's office after the very inexperienced Paetongtarn Shinawatra. There were always big questions about her capabilities. She was only in her 30s, had no real political experience, and that inexperience appears to have been exposed in this very ill-judged phone call she had with the veteran Cambodian figure Hun Sen, who leaked the substance of that phone call, which essentially had her complaining about her own military in a standoff between Cambodia and Thailand. That's gone down very badly here and damaged her.
This week on Channel Africa Conversations podcast, Peter Ndoro speaks to Ambassador Nkosinati George Twala about his stint as a diplomatic and stalwart. He talks about the struggle and the 1976 uprising in Soweto. Twala says now that freedom has been attained, there is still a long way to go before he can say he is truly free.
We're done. Politically, we now have the vote. What do we have to show for that vote? We're still discriminated against. Principally, I have no access to funds to do anything. Not me. When I'm saying me, I'm not talking of myself as an individual. I'm talking about a whole range of people. I'm talking about graduates who may have gone through schools, become microbiologists. Guess what? They then work as hotel receptionists. So we still have not evolved or develop this country to the extent where there can be a role for each and every person. Our schooling system seems not to be talking to what, in fact, there's no correlation between our educational system and even the labor department.
For a full interview of Channel Africa Conversations podcast, catch it on our YouTube channel at Channel Africa 1. Now, recapping on your top stories, the former Gabonese President Ali Bongo Ondimba has appeared before two investigative judges in Paris this week as part of a legal process he initiated following allegations of torture, abduction and detention by an organized group. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning.
Much Onele for that update. Musibudi Makura will come in a little bit later to give us our sports update around 10:30 Central African time to be specific, and thereafter we'll get our business news from Chandu Golike. You are listening to Channel Africa on DSTV channel 802, OpenView 628. Those are the audio bouquet channels. Remember, you can stream us on our SABC Plus app and also on our website www.channelafrica.co.za. If you want to catch the action on what's happening in studio, don't be shy. Go to our Facebook page, click on that live broadcast, and you will be able to see the vibe in our studios. We're moving into the second hour of the show. Thank you for joining us if you're just joining us right now. And we're going to be having our Becoming feature. And today we're going to speak about rites of passage. It looks different for different people in different belief systems that are part of our African experience. I know that many years ago, I had a rites of passage that was important for me. I decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to be a Christian, and then I got baptized, and that was such an important thing because it kind of sealed my faith. It made me feel like, you know what, I belong to a particular belief system, I belong to a group of people, but also I know that I'm certified in what I believe in. So it's different for many of us. Sometimes it's religious, sometimes it's cultural, sometimes it's traditional, but sometimes it's just modern. It's just the way things are and how things look in our communities that are very, very different. That's what's coming up on our Becoming feature. We'll look at the rites of passage and what they mean to us as Africans.
Looking forward to that conversation, of course. And in the next hour of the show, we're going to also having another great conversation in today's family and parenting corner, taking a look at really an experience of motherhood that many go through, and it goes by the name of motherhood loneliness. What exactly is that? And is motherhood a lonely experience sometimes? We'll be chatting to Tata Daisy Nyawira, counseling psychologist in Kenya, to have that conversation with us. Don't forget that you can continue to be a part of our conversations. As you know, we are live on our various platforms. Also, if you don't know, we are live on our social media platforms. We are live on YouTube. We are at Channel Africa 1 over there. You can also search Channel Africa on Facebook, and we are live there as well. So we can actually have these conversations face to face as you have it, and you can let us know where you're tuned in from. We love to see where, our conversations stretch to, and where on the continent or in the world that you are listening to these conversations. Of course, interact with us. Are there any rites of passage that you have had to be a part of throughout your life? We also have an On The Move poll taking place on our X handle, that's at Channel Africa 1. And we're asking you the question, should we preserve traditional initiation practices as they are, or should we adapt them to fit modern values and lifestyles? The options we give you there are we keep them as they are, we modify to suit modern times, or we create new and inclusive rituals. That's our On The Move poll. Use our hashtag On The Move. You can also comment under that poll to let us know what you think. It's 10 minutes past 10 Central Africa time. It's the second hour of On The Move.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana. Este é o caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
Representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o caleidoscópio do Canal África.
Palesa and Benjamin fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
Hey, it's time for our Becoming feature. This is where we try to develop ourselves as better people. And we know we do that in many different ways here on the African continent. One thing is very crucial for Africans is that in every stage of your life, there has to be a marking of that particular time and period of who you are. Across the African continent, initiation rites and coming of age ceremonies have long marked a sacred transition from childhood into adulthood, from innocence into responsibility. These deeply rooted traditions were more than cultural milestones. They are still powerful tools for teaching values, identity, discipline, and a sense of belonging. But today it's definitely true that Africa is experiencing fast urbanization, raising global citizens, and wrestling with new definitions of identity, of gender, and freedom. So what does initiation look like in today's society? Are we losing something vital when traditional rites disappear, or we're creating new space for something new, more inclusive ways of guiding our youth into adulthood? To help us on this Becoming a conversation, we're joined by Professor Simphiwe Sisanti, who is a South African academic whose work intersects African philosophy, education, journalism, and cultural rights. Professor Sisanti is a professor in the University of the Western Cape's Faculty of Education. We also have Mbaliyetu Gogo Nogukanya Kumalo, who is a traditional healer. Thank you so much for joining us, Prof. Thank you, Gogo, also for joining us here on the show.
Thank you very much, and greetings to you and Sanibona Gogo, and thank you for having me.
Greetings, Sanibona Togazani Ase, Namaste. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I think you are right on the kind of tone that we have with your greetings, the multiple greetings that you had there, Gogo, because that's where we are with ourselves and our identities today. There are very much blurred lines, but also there are definite ways of being. Let me start with you, Prof, with this conversation in terms of how do we define this complexity of rites of passages in today's modern life?
Let us begin by saying that, the understanding of culture makes reference to a people's complete and total way of life. This makes reference to their philosophies, this makes reference to their politics, and all of that, the manner in which they understand themselves, the manner in which they relate to their present environment, and the manner in which they relate to another or other environments that are not, physically discernible. So therefore, that being the case, in the context of the African continent, and I guess throughout the world, all human beings have a way of seeing the world. And that being the case, the present generation always inculcates particular values to prepare for the future. And so in the case of the African continent, that is no different at all. And therefore, institutions, or rather initiation schools, and I think that is the best way to call them, initiation schools, because, some of us tend to reduce initiation to circumcision. Circumcision is part of initiation. It is only one aspect of a very big role. And so the African people had that, and they continue to have that. But the tragedy, as with colonialism, is that, when the European colonialists came, they consciously sought to displace the manner in which we humanize and rehumanize ourselves, and to replace it with their own, imposing it upon us, so that the project and the objective was to valorize Europe on the one hand and to vilify the African people on the other hand, to put themselves at the center and to decenter or marginalize the African people at the same time. And so consequently, when African people were displaced in that way, they were no longer in charge of how they define themselves, but rather all other kinds of influences that are even distorting our very way of life were smuggled. And that is how we appear as a confused people. I'll pause there for the moment.
Coco, what's your take on what we mean by rites of passages? Do you agree with the Prof?
I couldn't agree more with the Prof, because that is actually the truth. If you look at it as Abantu who are rooted in Isintu and who practice Ubuntu, these rites of passages affirm our identity, our belonging, our accountability and responsibility to self first, because I get you start with yourself. To self first as Umuntu, and to your community, labantu, that you live with. So it is very true. And yes, when we seek initiation, or when we seek rites of passages, a lot of people usually just go to the initiation, and it starts from birth. It starts from if you look at cultures like the Nguni cultures and the Zulu cultures, that's from birth, with things like imbeleko, which is your welcoming and your introduction to the physical and the spiritual aspects of life, all the way to your teenagehood, to your young womanhood, and those are all rites of passages. However, with the displacement and the changes in introduction of these colonial systems and some religious beliefs, we have somehow had to redefine other practices, and also find new practices now today, where even a small thing as taking a taxi can be a rite of passage in some people. I met a woman.
Absolutely.
It was a big thing to say, my child has never been in a taxi. She is 17 years old. I am going to take her as part of a rite of passage on a taxi from the suburb to town, so she can, and that was a rite of passage for her.
Even a township experience, like I'm taking my child to go spend the weekend with Gogo, because the context is completely different.
Yes. So I look at it and I agree with the professor. It's how we were received into a lineage, spiritually, physically, and you can even say socially. It's that thing that says you are born, you belong. So these are the stages.
Let's talk a little bit about that after our break to look into maybe from birth. Let's take it seriously and maybe not try to water it down too much as we're going to also speak of that contemporary context, because like you said, which was very powerful, Gogo, the fact that it's something that actually happens from birth. There are certain rites of passages that you walk through, and there are certain things. Just recently, my girlfriend's mother had to cut my son's hair, and my mom was concerned about that as well. Like, how's that going to happen? Where it's going to happen? Called my girlfriend's mother, says, okay, so tell me a little bit about what you guys do. And they spoke a little bit about it. So the cutting of hair of my son was kind of a big thing. It was a ritual. Actually, it was done by my girlfriend's grandmother. It was fantastic. And I thought that was such an important moment for all of us that we all celebrated. But those are kind of things that we take for granted. They might seem small, but they're pivotal and they're very huge and symbolic in our families. We'll have a little chat after the break around that. Stay there on the line. It's 20 minutes past 10 o'clock Central African time. This is On the Move.
The Upside. Your afternoons just got even better.
Bantu Biko Street by Simpiwe Dana. Ndi ready. Simpiwe, 20 years in song. So what emotions come up when you hear that, hey, you've been doing this for 20 years now?
It almost feels like no time has passed, eh? I just, I know obviously time has passed, but I don't feel it. Even about my age, I'm 45. I always get shocked when I think, oh my God, in 5 years' time, I'll be 50. Because for me as an artist, it's almost like when it comes to certain things, time stands still. And as a result, you find that a lot of artists are very childlike, which, it helps them to always have a fresh approach to issues.
I tell you what, I'm feeling healed just by that.
We take no sides, none whatsoever. We are the Upside. No time to waste. Be on the move with Benjamin Moshatama and Palesa.
This is our becoming feature here on The Move. This is where we speak about the human experience and the various ways in which we disseminate this particular experience. Today we're speaking about rites of passage and, African rituals and cultures that speak to these really important milestones that happen in the journey of our lives, all the way from birth until death. There are various rites of passage that we observe. However, as, we modernize, as we globalize as well, we seem to be moving away from the traditional or cultural rites of passage, but there are still modern, informal ways that we still, go through some of these rites of passage. And we're exploring all these nuances with Professor Simpiwe Sesanti, South African academic whose work intersects African philosophy, education, journalism, and cultural rights. He's a professor at the University of the Western Cape's Faculty of Education, as well as Mbalietu Nokanya Kumalo, a traditional healer, who are helping us unpack this conversation. I'm going to come back to you, Gogo. I want to speak about the importance of these milestones because they happen, most of the time we like to really concentrate, or we speak a lot about those that happen between childhood and teenagehood, or that passage into adulthood. But even as adults, we are still going through various milestones. The first time you have a child, maybe you're about to get married, certain ages that we hit are also milestones. And death is a milestone as well that has its own cultural rites of passage. But what is the importance and the pivotal parts about actually taking part in these rituals and these rites of passage, and how do they help one cross over into that certain milestone?
All right. So traditionally, what they are, right, if we're looking at the traditional and cultural practice of things, they are what I would describe as a transition, the marking of your transition as a person, emotionally, spiritually, and socially, because they come with values and ethics and morals. Some of which are, because they wide rites of passage, isn't it? So some of which are family orientated. Some of which are community orientated, and some are tribal orientated. So they differ in they have their own different roles. However, they teach us things like responsibility, right? They teach us things like discipline. You know, when Umfana goes through the process of being Ibuto, a young adult, he's taught the discipline of a man.
Yeah.
Pardon me. How do you handle yourself as a man, you know, as a young man? What are your cultural values? And what is your role? What is your role in the home and in the community at the stage of your life? So it helps a lot in marking and building your identity. It anchored the identity of the person. So when we look at it as well, now, just to bring it forward a little bit, the stages, it's your birth, it's your pre-puberty, it's your puberty and your first cycle if you're a woman, it's your adolescence, it's your coming of age, and it's your all the way until you get to marriage, and then we do the death. But in between all of that, there's things like when a family member passes, how do we cross over as a family? Because not only is it a physical detachment, it's also in spirit, what is it doing that side, and understanding that, you know, when it comes to the cutting of the hair, there are families that will cut a piece of hair when somebody passes to burn it and take that ash and use it in a certain way, similar to when the child is born and they get to a certain age where they have to remove the hair that they were born with so that they can have a new grow of hair that's going to be that antenna that helps them connect with source energy. So those stages and all of that that encompasses who you are, your core. It encompasses you and your identity.
Professor,
that's what it was.
I'd like to come to you, Professor, to speak about the modern, rites of passage. Many of us have been displaced, and because of those displacements that have happened over decades and decades, we've also sort of moved further and further away and know less about, those cultural and traditional values and rites of passage. But that doesn't mean that there are no rites of passage actually taking place. I mentioned a few, actually, maybe something like a matric dance, which is something that is quite pivotal in the life of a young girl or a young boy. In fact, my son had a matric dance just last year. My family came, we gathered, we were proud, we wanted to see it, and you could tell that even though it wasn't a cultural or traditional ritual, it was a ritual of sort, because we all came together to be a part of that experience and to see him off in what we see as a new journey or a new transition of his life. Let's speak about those, because even though they're not rooted in those family values or those tradition and cultures, they are still taking place. A young girl or young boy in the township sitting on the particular corner and now being able to sit with particular people, maybe uncles and aunties who are able to speak to them about particular things. Those are also rites of passage, but they're not rooted in African cultures. They exist though, don't they?
No, thank you very much. Let us begin by saying that I'm quite intrigued by your reference to the term modern, because that's a very intriguing term in itself. Because when the Europeans came to the African continent and other colonialists, they imposed the definition of the term modern. So modern began to mean Western. Civilized began to mean Western. And that which is African began to be seen as primitive or something that is past. So if we begin then on that basis, I need to quickly begin by saying that the very context of education in which we are, participating is a Eurocentric education that is dislocated and sought to recreate the African in the image of everyone else. So it means that, therefore, as African people, we are dehumanized in that sense. And that is why we find ourselves being such a disempowered people. You are referring to school and school dances and all of that. Let me, colleague, when you're together with other colleagues, when colleagues are celebrating, guess what they do? Is that they take glasses and they do what they are calling, they toast, right?
Yes.
We toast and we say cheers. as an African, I'm curious you to tell me what that means for you. What does that ritual mean?
Yeah.
Many of us participate in that. We don't know what it means. We blow candles, we cut cakes. We don't know what that means. Our children wear school uniforms that, have been imported from Britain, from Europe and all of that. That is all kind of dehumanization. The schools, the higher institutions of learning are inculcating Eurocentric values. So that is all dehumanization. Right. So when I just completed my PhD, I was at Stellenbosch University with my colleagues. And then they said, let us do a toast. I said, please hold on. I took water and I went outside and I poured water on the ground. I was performing libation to my ancestors because I do not want to be hijacked in that fashion as African people continue to be. And so all these kinds of things that we do, even I think I made reference to the uniform. It's a very important, what you wear is a very important statement of who and what you are. And the Europeans did not make did not take any chance with that. And they said that our own traditional kind of, dress system was primitive, was outmoded, was this and that. In that sense, making us, intellectual dependents and zombies that we continue to be. Let me just conclude by saying quickly.
Go ahead.
In our culture, when we speak about family, we're talking about those who came before us, our ancestors, those who live now, and those that are yet to come. This reference meaning that we owe to uphold the teachings of our ancestors, and those of us who are alive must work for those that are yet to come. Those are deep values that are not seriously considered, that are treated and marginalized in the world that we live in. I'll pause.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to continue this conversation. It's fascinating because it's multifaceted and it's dynamic. And thanks to our guest for staying with us. We're going to keep you guys because it is so rich what we're talking about right now. And we'd like to continue this conversation. Go to our On The Move poll on X at Channel Africa 1 being the handle. We've got the poll there. We're asking, should we preserve traditional initiation practices as they are or adapt them to fit modern values and lifestyles? We've got 3 options. Keep them as they are. Second option, modify to suit modern times. And the third option is create new inclusive rituals. At Channel Africa 1, that's our handle. Let's quickly move on now and find out what's happening in sports with Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Benjamin. A very good morning from the sports desk. Andre Pollard says fierce competition for the Springbok number 10 jersey drives him to raise his game as he prepares to face off with Italy at Loftus Versfeld in the capital city Pretoria this coming Saturday. The 31-year-old 80-capped double World Cup winner is back in South Africa, having signed a 2-year deal with the Bulls and will now run out on his old home ground in Pretoria for the first of 2 test matches against the Azuri. Pollard is vying for the starting fly half spot with 23-year-old Sasha Feinberg Ngomezulu, a generational talent with about 8 caps to his name, and 27-year-old Mani Lebok, who featured at the 2023 World Cup with 19 caps to his name at the moment. Onto this now, the Australian government has confirmed it will contribute $2.25 billion which is about 7.1 billion cost of building the venues for the 2032 Brisbane Olympic Games, also clearing the way for the start of construction. Now, the Queensland taxpayers as well as the private finance will provide the balance of the money, the 17 new and as well as upgraded venues for the summer games under the funding deal announced by the state as well as federal governments earlier on today. Now, Brisbane was awarded hosting rights for the games in 2021, but political wrangling over the venues also meant the final plans were not decided until March of this year. So the organising committee chief executive officer Andrew Levers welcomed Thursday's announcement as a significant shift in moving the momentum forward. The main stadium, which is estimated to cost $4.7 billion, will be built in the city's Victoria Park and has a 60,000 capacity. And during the Olympics, they will fill it up to 60,000, where games games will be played, cricket games will be played. They will then raise that capacity by an extra 3,000 as from 2032. So a new aquatics centre will also be built, and that will host the swimming event from 2032, and that will cost about $750,000 US. And football news now, former Bayern Munich winger Leroy Sané expects the German Giants to hold their own against PSG in the quarterfinals of the FIFA Club World Cup when the two teams clash on Saturday. Sané made his comments just before he left the Bayern camp to complete his move to Galatasaray in the Turkish Super League, having spent 5 years in the Bundesliga under various coaches. Now, Bayern thrashed Flamengo 4-2 at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida, to book their spot in the last 8. Sané is confident that they can beat the current European champions in the hope, of course, that Bayern can lift the title in the USA when the quarterfinals get underway this weekend.
I think in football, so it doesn't matter at the end. You always want to play against the best team, always one of the best teams. I think this is where the pressure comes. We are all excited about it. So yeah, no matter who's the opponent, we're looking forward to it and go step by step.
Now, the ex-Manchester City attacker also pointed out that PSG were no slouches, having also taken Inter Miami apart, beating the host nation 4-0 to qualify for this year's quarterfinals.
I think everyone saw what they did the last six months, especially of the last season. They won the Champions League. And yeah, it will be an interesting game, I think, for everyone to watch. And let's see who's the better one, and hopefully Bayern.
Staying with the football news, Switzerland took the lead against Norway but fell to a 2-1 defeat on home soil after scoring an own goal on the opening day of the Women's Euro 2025 Championship on Wednesday, with Norwegian captain Ada Hageberg netting the equaliser and missing a penalty. So the hosts had plenty of opportunities to grab, but would have been a famous victory, but the Norwegians had to dig deep to snatch a narrow win, their third over the Swiss by a single goal in 2025. Now, having lost to Norwegians twice in the Nations League this year, the home side also dominated the opening 45 minutes. Swiss coach Pai Sundaj was unhappy that her side did not manage to get more out of yesterday's game. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Hello, Africa. We would love to hear your voice on our radio station. Be part of the fun and send a shout out or greeting message to your loved ones and your favorite Channel Africa presenters. Whether you're in Africa, the diaspora, or anywhere else around the globe, we want to hear your voice. Send your shout out message by sending an email to info@channelafrica.co.za or send them to our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Help us diversify our sound with your voice. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Benjamin Moshatama and Palesa on the move.
Let's keep things moving with our latest business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Palesa and Benjamin. Good morning. U.S. President Donald Trump will host leaders from 5 African nations in Washington next week to discuss commercial opportunities. Trump will host leaders from Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal for a discussion and lunch at the White House on the 9th of July. The Trump administration has axed U.S. foreign aid for Africa as part of a plan to curb spending it considers wasteful and not aligned with Trump's America First policies. It says it wants to focus on trade and investment and to drive mutual prosperity. In other news, climate change poses a major threat to food security in Mozambique, with small-scale farmers, particularly women and the youth, struggling due to inadequate farming knowledge and lack of market. This, according to Francisco Nahale, the country manager of global NGO Solidaridad. The organization focuses on transforming supply chain in agriculture in more than 50 countries. The NGO, together with the Heineken Africa Foundation and various organizations, has launched a project promoting regenerative agriculture for sustainable livelihoods in Mozambique. Nahale says this program aims to improve climate resilience for more than 4,000 farmers in the country's capital, Maputo.
With focus of empowering at least 60% of women and 30% of youths. And we also expect to benefit or impact about 20,000 community members indirectly. This program will achieve this promoting regenerative agriculture practice by improving the soil health and crop yields.
The International Monetary Fund says it remains engaged with Senegal as the West African country's Prime Minister promised a recovery plan to clean up billions in debts that were not disclosed by the previous administration. The IMF, a key financier for the debt-laden country, froze disbursements on its program with Senegal last year after an audit under new President Bassirou Diomaye Faye found the previous administration had understated deficits. This pushed its end 2023 debt ratio to roughly 100% of GDP versus the previously reported 74%. Kenya's private sector activity slowed in June with its biggest contraction in close to a year, driven by slower consumer spending and the impact of protests during the month. The Stanbic Bank Kenya Purchasing Managers Index fell to 48.6 from 49.6 in May. Readings above the 50.0 mark indicate expansion in business activity, while those below show contraction. The contraction was the sharpest in 11 months. South Africa's youth unemployment crisis continues to deepen, with a staggering 62.4% of those aged 15 to 24 now without work. But amidst these grim figures, a story of hope is emerging from the private sector. Concentric South Africa is making a tangible difference through its skills development and leadership programs, transforming lives and offering a pathway to employment for hundreds of young South Africans. Director at Concentric South Africa, Jason Locke, says they have the ability to create positive business outcomes for the youth.
The youth of South Africa is absolutely brimming with potential. You know, Concentrix is a great learning organization. We've got the ability to help unlock that potential to create really positive business outcomes for our international. So getting great outcomes for the country in terms of one of the biggest challenges that it currently faces. Unlike traditional hiring strategies, our approach really focuses on providing opportunities for those from underrepresented communities. And what we're wanting to do there is remove the barriers to entry that they face.
Financial indicators at this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira, 532 in Botswana, 13 Pula 14. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 47. In Zambia, 23 Kwacha 96. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 Real 45. In Russia, 78 rubles 72. In India, 85 rupee 63. China, 7 yuan 16. South Africa, 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is at 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,355, platinum at $1,404 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $68.50 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Step into the heart of the day on the move with Palesa and Benjamin.
Well, we've been having this really intriguing and quite informative conversation on rites of passage, and it's incredible to hear and to really understand, the history of ourselves as African people, but also where we currently find ourselves, maybe the confusion and the difference between what we see as cultural and traditional and also what we see as modern. We're continuing this particular intriguing conversation with Mbalie Tukokonokhanya Khumalo, a traditional healer, as well as a professor at the University of the Western Cape's Faculty of Education, Professor Simpiwe Sisanti. Well, Professor, before we went on the break, you were chatting a little bit about the term modern, which is great because you were able to sort of educate us on the fact that what we term as modern is largely actually Western, and we have sort of dissolved a lot of our African practices. However, I want us to come back into the reality in which we currently live in, because although that is true, what we do refer as modern is largely Western, but because we are living in a more Western and globalized environment now, and we find ourselves in this space, but we still need to identify with ourselves in some sort of way, and still also need to identify how we are transitioning in this new way that we are seeing ourselves in. So I want us to, move away, not really move away, but look at us and look at the lived experiences that we are in now, and try and redefine or define what rites of passage would be like or would transition into for us today, and maybe how we can also start bringing back some of those cultural values into our current rites of passage.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by saying that, since the age of 9, I engaged myself in the revolutionary struggles of our people. That is, I was involved in the decolonization struggles. Yeah. And so, we always have to understand that colonialism does not merely refer to the geographical dislocation. More than anything else, it refers to the spiritual and the cultural dislocation. While it is easy that you could have prime ministers, presidents who are black, it is not easy, for a people to return to themselves and to be in charge of their own identity. Yeah. And so again, I go back to the point that you were making, that how do we try, to fit into the modern? I refuse to fit into the modern, because what that means, is that the so-called modern, Steve Bantubiko pointed this out this very well. There's a difference between integration and assimilation. When you integrate, you move and mingle with people at a level of equality. But when you're assimilated, you are being swallowed up. And so my responsibility as an African, as an intellectual, and as a philosopher is to demand that, I be given, or rather I take back my space to define who and what I am on my own terms. And therefore, in the present moment, for us, the reclamation of our African cultural values is the most important thing. And sister, listen, I spoke about the definition of a community or family. This is very important for us. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who has just passed on recently, said to us, when we are speaking about our ancestors, we are speaking about inspiration. When we are speaking about the present, we are speaking about perspiration, working hard. And when we are speaking about the future, we are speaking about aspiration. The reason today that we have selfish young people, we have selfish politicians who claim to be leaders, is that they don't understand this definition of being human, because they have no sense of ethics that they acquire from our ancestors. They have no sense of hard work that we must do so that we prepare for those that were yet to come. We are greedy, selfish human beings because we have been co-opted into a culture that promotes and advances individualism, whereas our ancestors emphasized the point of being communal, the point of being social, the point of being altruistic. And so that to me is the most important thing.
I think that insistence is something that we can push forward with you, Gogo Nogukhanya, because at times we are kind of co-opting the other to kind of feel like we have a belonging to a large extent. And I think it's important for our becoming feature to insist on who we are as Africans. Most of the insistence is difficult for us in our contemporary setting because that means we need to now do a lot of research and actually do a lot of context and look back and a lot of digging. And some people are too lazy to actually do that, Gogo Nokukanya. In terms of our rites of passage, is that investigation done enough? And where do we start if you feel like you're listening to the conversation right now and you feel like, I don't even know how to make a tracing or how to trace this particular historical context for me to actually grab a piece of myself and actually participate in something that's going to define me through this rites of passage journey?
All right. I love what the professor said. And where I usually start when we work with people is start with self. Who am I? You know, who am I? And then you identify that within Ubuntu, right? And then in cases where we do find that where people are so displaced from their family that they don't even have a link that they can talk to or someone that they could go to and stay and find out all this information, all right? Other people are just not willing to go and open themselves up to strangers and such and such. But home is the first place to start. Your own family is where you start to speak to your parents, speak to the aunties, speak to the mkulus, the grandparents in structures where you still have those people that are alive. However, also, one thing that a lot of people are scared of today is reading the book. People like a professor have written papers and research papers. And research papers, they were everywhere. The institution, the University of the Western Cape, UKZN, Fort University, as well as VET. They've got faculties that have written with research papers that you can read and understand how it works, what did it require, what happens in this case. That you can also go do research on your people as well. You said there's a place in KZN, for those that are in KZN, there's a place in Olundi that is called Imakupa. It is a museum, however, it's got a library that's got a list of surname books on the history and the traditional practices of those people in those surnames. So it's not because the information is not there, but it's the willingness of you in saying, who am I and what am I choosing to do now?
Okay.
Am I conscious and am I awake to make the move, to make the change, to get back to me? Because I am from the people who marked time with fire. Right? So I had to take charge of myself, to come and bring myself back to who I am, my whole. But if you don't want to do that, there are no quick fixes, there are no quick is a pill that you can take a pill and then it reminds you and it's the
you can't microwave this one. There's no microwave. Okay, Gogo, we've run out of time, unfortunately. I wish we could continue because it's at a rich ending, but we have to say goodbye to you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Mbaliye Tukumalo Gogo Nokukanya is a traditional healer joining us there on the line alongside Professor Simpiwe Sisanti, a South African academic whose work intersects African philosophy, education, journalism, and cultural rights. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Let's take a break. We'll be back.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Bana Boy huyo anajulikana kama Damini Ebunoluwa Ogolo, maarufu kama Bana Boy. Alizaliwa Julai 2 mwaka 1991. Ni mwimbaji na mwandishi wa nyimbo kutoka nchini Nigeria. Alipata umaarufu mnamo mwaka 2012 baada ya kutoa wimbo wake wa kwanza kabisa ambao ulijulikana kwa jina la Like to Party kutoka ndani ya studio Live 2013. Mnamo mwaka wa 2017 Bana Boy alisaini na bendi Habit Atlantic Records huko Marekani na One Music Group. Albamu yake ya tatu ya studio ya nje 2018 iliweka alama ya kwanza ya lebo yake. Mnamo mwaka 2019 alishinda sheria ya kimataifa ya bora kabisa kwenye tuzo za BET za 2019. Alitangazwa pia kama msanii wa Apple Music's Up Next.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live 5 days a week. Internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story. A living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent. African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices. English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story. A living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent. African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices. English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe.
This song means we're having such a good time, and we definitely are having a really, really good time. This is Them Tuda, the musical chef, and Emos. Good is Nice is the name of this one, featuring Sipho Makududela right there. And it's also my favorite song, actually, me and my mom's favorite song. So I'm sure, I don't know if she's dancing where she is, because she has a little bit of a problem with her leg, but hopefully she's dancing wherever she is. Hey,
Fola mama, fola.
It's 10:57 Central Africa time. Wow. Such a multi-layered conversations that we had, and from the way that we started it to the way that we finished it, I'm glad that at the end of it, the assertions of our guests to say, no, we don't want to change. In fact, we hold strong, we put our feet in the ground, and we solidify that we will not change for anything. We are African, we'll always be African, and no matter how things change, and no matter the kind of influences that happen, we want to reroute and continue to do things in our own African way. We're speaking about rites of passage, and I think that's that's a very important assertion to make, to say it doesn't matter where we've been displaced, it doesn't matter how we've been influenced, but we need to remember who we are, and we need to be firm in who we are so that we can have a future of not, watered down African versions of ourselves, but still continue to be the influence that we want to see. Just be us, be African. Too. Asibasabi, siyabafuna. So yeah, really interesting conversation there. What do you think about that one? Rites of passage is the conversation that we're having. Our On the Move poll is also still on, and we want to know what you think about this one. Should we preserve traditional initiation practices as they are, or adapt them to fit modern values and lifestyles? Well, our guest said no, but you have a right to vote as well. Keep them as they are is the first option on our On the Move poll. That's at Channel Africa 1 on X. Modify for modern times is our second option, and create inclusive rituals is the third option that we have for you there. So please participate in our On the Move poll. It's going to be up throughout the show. We have another hour ahead of us, and we'd like to see what your assertions and what your votes are on the rites of passage of Africans after the end of the show. At Channel Africa 1, once again, on X, on Instagram, on TikTok, as well as on YouTube, and on Facebook, we are simply Channel Africa. We can also hear your voice. Our WhatsApp number is +27 63406 9126. We're wrapping up this hour of the show. There's still more conversations. Yes, I know we're having a lot of fun today, and the conversations continue into the next hour. Onele Nzinzi is back with our latest news update.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Palesa. Looking at your top stories, chaired opposition leader Success Masra ends hunger strike, and Thailand's king swears in a new cabinet. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. Chad's former Prime Minister and prominent opposition leader Success Masra has ended a hunger strike launched during his recent detention, which many have labelled as politically motivated. Masra, widely seen as a rising political force in the country, began the protest to draw attention to what he described as an unjust detention following Chad's controversial presidential elections earlier this year. Tabiso Lihugo reports.
Geopolitical analyst Aaron Ngambi says that the move was a calculated effort to shine a light on the state of political repression in the country. Though his physical health deteriorated, the message was clear that he was willing to risk everything to expose the crackdown on dissent. Masra's imprisonment sparked criticism from both regional observers and civil society groups, many of whom argue that the charges against him were designed to silence political opposition.
The former Gabonese President Ali Bongo Ondimba appeared before two investigative judges in Paris this week as part of a legal process he initiated following allegations of torture, abduction and detention by an organized group. Ondimba's complaint, lodged with full civil party status, stems from events surrounding the military takeover that removed him from power in 2023. The French judiciary's involvement points to the growing international dimensions of the case, particularly given Bongo's long-standing ties with France and his dual nationality links through family. General Brice Oligui Nguema, who was officially sworn in as president in April this year, dismissed the claims in March, insisting there had been no instance of torture or abuse. The Human Rights Commission in South Africa has expressed concern at reports that some health care facilities are denying treatment to individuals on the basis of nationality or documentation status. The Commission is also disturbed by some people who are preventing undocumented foreign nationals from accessing medical health care facilities. The Commission says such practices are not only unethical and unlawful, but also inconsistent with South Africa's obligations under both domestic and international human rights law. Human Rights Commissioner Sandra Mukwasha.
The Constitution provides all those who are within the Republic of South Africa with access to healthcare, including emergency healthcare. Therefore, the treatment of foreigners, whether documented or undocumented, by preventing them from accessing healthcare services is unconstitutional and violates not only the Constitution but other laws in South Africa. Furthermore, South Africa has international obligations in respect of providing access to healthcare to all within its borders.
Lastly, Thailand's king is due to swear in a new cabinet that will see a third person in a week take on the role of prime minister. Phumtham Wechayachai will become acting premier as he outranks a colleague who filled the post for only a day. The BBC's Jonathan Head reports.
Many Thais will be relieved to see such an experienced pair of hands in the Prime Minister's office after the very inexperienced Paetongtarn Shinawatra. There were always big questions about her capabilities. She was only in her 30s, had no real political experience, and that inexperience appears to have been exposed in this very ill-judged phone call she had with the veteran Cambodian figure Hun Sen, who leaked the substance of that phone call, which essentially had her complaining about her own military in a standoff between Cambodia and Thailand. That's gone down very badly here and damaged her.
Now, former diplomat in South Africa, Ambassador Nkosinathi George Twala, says there needs to be accountability by elected leaders in government. He was speaking on Channel Africa Conversations podcast with Peter Ndoro.
Accountability doesn't seem to be a matter that should make us very angry if you refuse to account for anything. I'm talking about elected leaders in this instance. I mean, I watched an interview from Minister of Education, who's asked there the sitters who is heading them, and she refuses to account. Well, refuses, no. She dodges accountability. What are we expected to do?
Now be sure to catch the full interview on our YouTube channel at Channel Africa 1. Now recapping on your top stories, Chad, former Prime Minister and prominent opposition leader Success Masra has ended a hunger strike launched during his recent detention, which many have labelled as politically motivated. Now, for any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective. The world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no.
Swiftly today, and the conversations are really making an impact. We're continuing into the third hour of On the Move right here on Channel Africa. It's 6 minutes past 11 Central Africa time. Yes, you're still tuned in to On the Move with myself, Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama. And if you've just joined us, I don't know where you've been because, hey, you've missed out on a lot. But don't worry. We always have options for you to catch up on the conversations that you have missed, especially those highlight conversations. Head on over to our website, www.channelafrica.co.za. I'm doing that as well right now. And when you get there, click on the programs tab that you'll find on our homepage. You'll find your way through so many shows that are here on Channel Africa, all of them just so incredible. But this is the show you're looking for. It's On the Move, and under our show's details, that's where you can find our podcast. And of course, it's another great way to engage with the content that we have for you here and to catch up on the conversations you've missed, of course. But in this hour of the show, we go into our family and parenting corner. It's another important one because remember, like our guest said in the hour before, as Africans, we are communal and we do believe in family and community. And this particular conversations and this feature highlights those, the community, our families and parenting as a whole. But we're speaking about motherhood, and usually it's an experience that we paint as joyful, bonding, unconditional love. But many times behind the facade of, trying to show people and show up as a mother, to show people that, wow, you're so loving, you're so caring, you do all these things for the children and for everyone who's involved, could be some loneliness that is there. So we're going to be speaking about motherhood loneliness. What is it and where exactly does it stem from? Tata Daisy Nyawira is a counseling psychologist who's going to be joining us in this hour for that conversation.
Hey, you matter in this conversation, so let us know what you think of the different conversations, and maybe you've got some tips on what other conversation we can have. Just hashtag us on the move as you send the WhatsApp number. The message, the WhatsApp number is +27 63406926, and we love always hearing from you. Hey, we never the same without you. It's always great for you to be part of the show, and I see we've got an interesting response to the conversation we were having earlier on. Ibrahim always gives us his thoughts on the show. Ibrahim says, excellent show, great conversations as usual. I'd go as far as to say a little bit of both, maybe not to keep them 100% as they are, but to adapt to the times we live in without dismantling or moving away from where we come from and what makes us authentically African. He's participating in our On The Move poll at Channel Africa 1. We want to get your thoughts. I've just made my thoughts felt there as well. I've just clicked on one of the options there. We're asking, should we preserve traditional initiation practices as they are, or adapt them to fit modern values and lifestyles? Giving you 3 options in that. We want you to vote. First option is keep them as they are, modify for modern times being the second option, and then the third option being create inclusive rituals. And with a few of our votes, it seems like most people are saying modify them for modern times. Maybe you disagree. Let us know at Channel Africa 1 on X. Participate in that On The Move poll. Hey, we're going to be back with our parenting feature. I'm looking forward to it.
This Mandela Month, we honor his belief that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world.
Education is one of the most important weapons in a country.
Catch us on DSTV Bouquet 802. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Protests have erupted in parts of Kenya with police firing tear gas at protesters. The protests are in honor of those killed in huge anti-tax demonstrations a year ago. Alex Kiari.
We just received a communication from Kenya's communications regulator, the Communication Authority of Kenya, which has ordered for the end of all live broadcasts for the ongoing protests in the country, and they are citing this as saying that it's a security threat and contrary to Article 33, Section 1 of the Kenyan Constitution, which allows them that chance to do that.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Channel Africa and you have got something in common. The thirst for knowledge.
Many times when we speak about motherhood, we think of it in such, a light-hearted way. Mothers are so caring, they're gentle, they're kind. We think of it as this beautiful exploration of the relationship between mother and child. And it's often painted as joyful, as, utopic, and with bonding and unconditional love as a part of it. But behind that beautiful image lies a side that we rarely speak about, the deep aching loneliness that many mothers carry quietly, and also the guilt that they carry with that loneliness as well. From sleepless nights to days spent caring for others while neglecting their own needs, countless women find themselves feeling isolated, unseen, and emotionally drained. It's kind of a loneliness that doesn't always come from being alone per se, but from a feeling of being disconnected, even in a full house. And today we're talking about that, why motherhood can be so lonely, and what we can do to support women who give so much of themselves to everyone else. Tata Nyawira is joining us on the line. She's a counseling psychologist from Kenya to help us unpack this. Thank you so much, Tata, for your time. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
It can be quite a draining thing because, society's norms really can overlook the feelings of women and mothers as a whole, especially because women and mothers are expected to be joyful about motherhood. They're expected to be have this unconditional love, and they're expected to take care of absolutely everyone. But behind that is a guilt that women feel, especially when they feel that loneliness and they can't actually tell anyone because they feel like, I'm not a mother enough, and why am I feeling this way?
Right. Thank you so much, Palesa, for having me. And it's true. I feel like I join in not just as a counseling psychologist, but also as a mother who has also gone through exactly what you're talking about, which is the loneliness. I think before, when you're single and you're thinking about motherhood, it looks like it's this nice thing.
Yeah.
And you feel like mothers have it all together. What you don't count on is when you get in, and even just before you see your child, just the pregnancy journey. It can be very isolating because experiences differ from woman to woman. So some people have such bad pregnancy experiences, and because no one seems to talk about it, I feel like women really downplay what pregnancy and motherhood is, such that people, as a mother, you end up feeling very, very lonely because you can't really talk about it. And then you are expected, as you've said, you are expected to be joyful. You are expected to have it figured out. Even when you're a new mom, you are expected to know what to do when a baby cries. You are expected to know what to do even with your own body. Yet, at times, even as a mom, your own body, it's like it gives up on you. So you have your stomach is distended, your nose is distended, you're not feeling very beautiful. So you have self-esteem issues that come along because of the pregnancy and motherhood journey. Yet somehow, as you're saying, everyone expects you to be happy. Everyone expects you to have it figured out. This is very, very isolating, especially nowadays, even in the African community where we used to be very communal, but right now there's a lot of isolation. So mothers are doing the journey of motherhood alone, without their aunties, without their grandmothers, without their own mothers, even walking with them to tell them what to expect. And that in and itself can be very, very overwhelming.
That is incredibly true. And a lot of us is society's imposition on what motherhood should be. And sometimes when we don't feel exactly like those societal impositions, we feel guilty that we're not doing it right, or maybe we're just not like other mothers. And you are right to say that women don't speak much about those feelings behind the scenes. And that also further exacerbates, not talking about the loneliness that they feel, because what they're seeing is that, well, all the other mothers are perfect. Why am I feeling unperfect? Let's speak a little bit about that. The reason behind the barrier of not being able to describe or understand your loneliness in a world where you also feel that everyone is doing it right and perhaps you're the only one getting it wrong.
That is actually very true, because I find that I don't know if it's how we have been socialized, especially as African women, to have it figured out, to know what to do. We saw our mothers doing it effortlessly. Our mothers didn't talk about the pain. They didn't talk about the guilt. They didn't look exhausted either. They cooked for their families, took care of their husbands, and still went to work. And they did it so effortlessly. So as a young girl, as you come into adulthood, then there's an expectation that has been set by society that you should be able to be a super mom.
Yes.
You're not even allowed to delegate. right? Because I see it now with our generation where you want to delegate because, to be honest, you're exhausted, but you feel so guilty doing it. I was actually talking about it this morning when I was telling my friend, I want to go to the gym, but I feel guilty when I'm not back to take my child to school.
Yeah.
Where is this guilt coming from? This guilt comes from our society. We have been labeled as mothers to be almost like super women who should know what to do, when to do it. And because no one talks about the exhaustion that comes with giving of ourselves to everyone but ourselves, then you end up feeling very, very guilty, even having that feeling of that maybe I actually don't like my children that much. They are exhausting.
And you know what? I
Right.
even beg to differ to say that we saw our mothers doing it so effortlessly. Of course, we were looking at that from the lens of a child looking at a mother. But when you become a mother yourself, you realize that our parents were not doing it, obviously. They were also, had those impositions of society to make it look effortless because there was no one to talk to and there were no spaces to speak about that kind of thing to anyone. So no, our parents didn't do it effortlessly. No, our mothers did not. They were going through the same loneliness, the same guilt, the same shame that we go through today because there were no spaces to speak about that. But let's speak about identifying this loneliness. As a mother, when you start having these feelings of motherhood loneliness, you'll go maybe to your spouse or to your family and they'll say, but we're here, what do you mean? And you're like, you don't understand. You are here, but you're also part of my responsibility because I have a responsibility to also be your spouse, to be this, to be that. And even though you are helping, you cannot understand the feeling of being a mother or this mother that I am at this particular point. How can you identify and start working through those emotions of loneliness?
Oh wow, that's actually great, and I like what you've talked about earlier, the fact that our mothers went through it.
Yeah.
It's just that from the eyes of a child, then it looked like they were doing it effortlessly.
Right.
However, now as an adult, if you're going through the motions of guilt and loneliness, one of the things that I talk about is just being able to be aware. I feel like most times when you're going through anything emotional, when you don't catch it, when you're not aware, then it catches you off guard. But if you're aware, because some of the adjustment, especially as you get into motherhood, is actually very normal, because then you feel tired, you feel uncertain, you're also worrying about your baby. It's the first time you're going through this. The adjustment is normal. But if you start feeling like, and I would say if you start feeling numb, if you start feeling hopeless, if you start feeling detached, if you have constant guilt, it's not just guilt for today, but you're constantly feeling like you're a bad mother, if you're consistently feeling like you want to blame yourself, or you're also even withdrawing from your loved ones, or you're having difficulty sleeping, even when the baby is asleep, then you're having difficulty sleeping because most probably you're worrying. And this is what also happens to moms and new moms. You don't want help. You don't want to delegate because you feel like your child only needs you.
Yes.
And then lastly, which is very important, if you start having thoughts of harm to yourself or to the baby, then it's important that you catch yourself and be able to tell either your spouse or someone close to you or even a friend that this is how I'm feeling, so that then they can either be able to help you, support you, or even direct you to maybe a mental health practitioner.
Okay, Tata, we need to take a break. We'll continue this conversation after this. We're speaking to counseling psychologist and mother Tata Nyawira about motherhood loneliness. We'll continue after this break.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Palesa and Benjamin fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
Hey, most of the time when we look at mothers, because they are the busy ones, they're the ones doing stuff in our lives, and we are around them while they're doing the stuff, and they're accommodating all of us with their octopus hands, which they actually don't have. We think they're fine, right? We think because they are doing the doing that they're probably okay, and we never really check on them. And also we continue to give them tasks and not support them and continue to allow the status quo to remain by saying, that's what mothers do. Of course, mothers cook, mothers clean, mothers sit down, they have a chat with us. Mothers are in their workspaces, even at work, at home, making sure that they meet their deadlines. But there's this phenomenon, motherhood, loneliness can actually happen. Maybe it happens to most women. I think it actually does, because we never really check up on our mothers. And we're speaking to our guest today to chat a little bit about that. That's Tata Nyawira, a counseling psychologist joining us from Kenya. Tata, let's talk a little bit about that, because the tasks feel like at times when we look at outside that, these are mothers' tasks. These are mothers' activities. Even all the things that you've been highlighting. It's like, what must we do now? No one can give birth except the mother. We stick to those stereotypes because that's what we do when it comes to functions of mothers. We think being a mother is a function. We don't see the mother as a human being. How do we change that kind of a thinking, and how do we notice their need for support?
I think maybe by starting to ask them if they need help. And I must talk to mothers, because at times mothers, even when they're asked, do you need help? You'll hear them saying no.
Yeah. Because, mothers also like it done their way as well. That's another thing.
They like it done their way. It's true. They like it done their way. And that's why I'm starting to talk to them first. Because at times you have a spouse, you have maybe your sister or a friend coming in, and they truly, truly want to help. But because you seem and look fine, then chances are that they don't know what else to do. So from the mother, so let's start with the mother. The mother needs to be able to relinquish control. It's very difficult, but a diaper will just be put on. It doesn't have to be perfect. Mm-hmm. If it's a romper, it can be put on in any way. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can delegate for someone else to be cooking and doing laundry so that it's not all on you. We have to start by showing that we are human, first of all, as mothers. But the second thing is that for the people who are around a mom, just notice that the mom is just a human being and they need help. And at times it's difficult for the mom to ask. So what you can do is come in and do the other chores, be it laundry, be it cooking, be it even taking the baby away so that she can rest and assuring her that the baby will be fine. If you ask her, how can I help? Then, because I've talked to them, then it will be easier for you to be able to come in and do those other things, because she's the only one, it's true, who can give birth. Mm-hmm. She's the only one who can breastfeed. But at some point, if she's able to pump the milk, then someone else can be able to give the child the milk so that the mother rests. But it comes from, because we talked about the barriers of why mothers don't talk. It comes from us as the society, making it easier for mothers to be able to say, I'm tired, and them not feeling judged. Because most times when you say, I'm tired of mothering, the whole time someone will tell you, but you wanted a child. So what's making you tired?
Wow, that is such...
I wanted a child, even though I wanted a job, it's not tiring, it's exhausting.
Oh wow, people can say some of the meanest things, Also, I think another key is, Tata, that let the mother be themselves as well. At times we allow mothers just to be at home all the time. Mother gets from work to home every single day, work to home, does all the tasks. I think at times mother can also go for a tea date with their girlfriends. Mother can also have a quiet time in prayer and just reading a book. Mother can also have time outside in the garden having her tea by herself. Mother can do a little hobby, go to the gym like yourself. Allow mother to also do activities that are connected to her likings as well.
Mm-hmm. That's very true, and that's why I started by talking to the mothers, because one, you have to be very self-aware to be able to know that I do not ask for help easily. I do not know how to delegate. I do not know how to relinquish control. It starts with self-awareness, so that by the time someone is telling you I can stay home with the children and you go do something, you need to be aware enough to say that before I became a mom, I loved dancing, I loved reading, I loved going to the gym. Motherhood shouldn't come and occupy you in a way that you completely lose yourself, which is what we see. And you know what happens later, Benjamin? We start becoming very resentful of the people around us.
Sure.
But it is us who have not given ourselves permission to be ourselves, even though now we are mothers.
Yeah. Let's talk to the mother, because you've given them so much advice, but also just allowing them also not to feel okay. I think sometimes we don't allow mothers to not feel okay, to feel sad, to feel down, to feel tired, to feel upset, to have an emotional nuanced space within them. I think we always want mothers to be happy, mothers to be strong, but let's also give them permission to feel whatever they want to feel or how they feel at the moment.
That's true. I feel like when I talked about mothers being human and being allowed to be human, that's one of the things, that they can be allowed to be sad, to even feel exhausted, to even feel angry. There are days, let me tell you, you look at your children, you love them, but you actually don't want to be around them. And that is okay.
That's okay. Absolutely.
And that's okay. And we should be able to allow moms to be. I think I liked what you said, allowing mothers to be, and to be honest enough to say that this is actually exhausting, or I'm feeling exhausted and maybe I need a break.
Yeah, absolutely. Tata, where can people go to find out some of the work that you do, or maybe get your assistance online? Maybe you do some courses, or maybe you do some content online. Where can they find you?
On social media, if you're on Instagram, if you're on Facebook, you can go and look for Tata Nyawira. Nyawira is Nyawira. So you can find me on social media, on LinkedIn, on TikTok. You'll find me. As long as you type in Tata Nyawira, you will find me. And you'll be able then to come into contact with just the things that I do and what I talk about, because I truly love to just help people even figure out how their own childhood, because when we talk about mothering, it starts with how were they mothered themselves.
Absolutely. Tata, it's always good speaking to you. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much.
That's Tata Nyawira, counseling psychologist in Kenya. Find her on social media. She does some fantastic content there. Well, let's move on and get to our latest sports update. Musibudi is going to wrap up things for the morning.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Benjamin. A very good morning from the Sports Desk. Well, it's breaking news in the world of sport this hour. So Liverpool forward Diogo Jota has died in a car crash at the age of 28. The Portugal forward's brother Andre Silva also died in the accident which took place in the Spanish province of Zamora. The 26-year-old was also a professional footballer for Portuguese second-tier club Penafiel. So reports say that their car, a Lamborghini, left the road due to a tyre blowout while overtaking another another vehicle and then caught fire. Jota married his longtime partner Ruto Cardoso, with whom he had 3 children with, just last month. He recently also posted pictures on social media of their ceremony, which took place on the 22nd of June. Jota, you'd remember, helped Liverpool win the Premier League title just last season before helping Portugal win the Nations League final in June of this year. It's a developing story. We'll take it forward throughout the course of the afternoon right here on Channel Africa. On to this now. Former Football Association of Zambia President Kalusha Bwalia has been appointed the vice chairperson of the Zambia Football Association National Team Technical Subcommittee. Bwalia, regarded as one of Zambia's finest footballers, brings a wealth of experience both on and off the pitch. Meanwhile, other legends of the game appointed to the National Team Technical Committee include Kenneth Maloti, veteran coach Danny Kabwe, as well as former Zambia's national soccer team coach Patrick Piri. The committee is expected to provide key technical advice as well as oversight for the development as well as the performance of Zambia's national men's as well as women's football teams. Remaining on the continent, with the eyes set now on the East African region, Kenya has made a bold statement of intent by officially handing over the refurbished Kasarani Stadium to the local organising committee ahead of the 2024 Total Energies African Nations Championship Chan tournament. So the stadium, which has undergone extensive renovations, will not only serve as Kenya's primary venue but also host the final match of this year's competition on the 30th of August. The symbolic handover was conducted by Kenya's Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Salim Mvura, who said the move marked a critical milestone in the country's journey towards hosting the 8th edition of the Chan tournament. The Moi International Sports Centre, also known as Kasarani, will host all Group A matches involving the host nation Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Morocco, Angola, as well as Zambia. Harambee Stars under coach Benny McCarthy will begin their campaign at the same venue against the Democratic Republic of Congo on Sunday, the 3rd of August. The Chan tournament will be co-hosted by Kenya, Uganda, as well as Tanzania, running from the 2nd until the 30th of August. On to athletics news now. Former South African 400-meter champion Laith Pillay is preparing for his upcoming trip to Italy on the 15th of July following his recovery from a short injury layoff. Now, Pillay is also set to represent the University of South Africa team at the upcoming World Student Games in Germany. That's from the 16th until the 27th of June. Pillay told SABC Sport he's feeling fit and ready to resume his training session as he sets his sights now on competing at his 2nd World Senior Championships in Tokyo in Japan later on this year. British number 1 Emma Raducanu produced one of the best displays in recent times to sweep aside the 2023 champion Marketa Vondrousova and reach the Wimbledon 3rd round in an outstanding performance marked by authority as well as intensity. The 22-year-old won that game 6-3, 6-3 in just 82 minutes amid an electric atmosphere on centre court. It was also she's also now set to face off with the world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka, and if she's to beat Sabalenka, she'll have to be at her top of the game if she is to beat the current world number 1, who's vying, of course, to win her first ever Wimbledon title.
I mean, there were some points that I have no idea how I turned around. I think one for sure that I remember in the second set, but I knew playing Marketa, it was going to be an extremely difficult match. I mean, she's won this tournament and it's a huge, huge achievement. So she's also in form really well. So I'm just so happy with how I competed, put my game out on the court, and I was just really focused the whole way through.
Right, so that concludes your morning sports news right here on Channel Africa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Africa at Play with NATO and ETO chairman.
The Confederation of African Athletics, CAA President Mr. Hamad Kalkaba Malboum, talk to us about the state of athletics in Africa as it stands, and what picture are you looking at 5 years later?
Yeah, athletics in Africa is strong. We are able to organize our major events in time. Like this year, we will have the under-20 and under-18 African Championship in Nigeria. Next year, we will have the senior in Ghana. In 2027, we will go back to Algeria to organize the under-18 and under-20. And then 2028, we will have the senior championship in Gaborone in Botswana. Well, by this program, we can increase our performance. And at the same time, we are considering the fact that within the Police Federation, they are identifying young talent every year within their national program, within the scholarship championship. And so the athletics in Africa is in good standard.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Step into the heart of the day on the move with Palesa and Benjamin.
Thank you, Musibudi, for that sports update. We keep things moving once again with Chanduko Ligege, who has our latest in business.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Palesa and Benjamin. Good morning. Tanzania's central bank lowered its benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points to 5.75%. The Bank of Tanzania targets inflation of 5%, and consumer inflation has hovered around 3% since it launched its policy rates in January 2024. Tumelo Zulu has more.
The East African country's government sees economic growth rising to 6% this year, up from 5.5% last year, helped by the start of electricity generation at the Julius Nyerere hydropower dam. President Samia Suluhu Hassan's administration has been pushing ahead with large-scale infrastructure projects like the dam and a railway network ahead of elections due in October.
In South Africa, Johannesburg's power utility City Power says it will cushion poor, low-income households from paying increased service and availability charges as new tariffs kicked in this week. City Power customers are now paying an increase of 12.4% for electricity, in line with the city's approved tariffs for the 2025-26 financial year. However, City Power says the increases will vary per customer category based on usage and tariff structure. Frank Hinda is City Power Senior Manager for Pricing and Tariff Structures.
Overall, it will be about 12.41% on average, but various customer categories will see different rates because this is also driven by our cost of supply studies, which says customers contribute in a different way to the cost of supplying electricity, and the pricing should be reflective of that. Also, because for residential customers, we have got inclining block tariffs. It then means that as you use more, your price increase. So the amount of money that you will be spending on the electricity will also then be going up. However, indigent customers are still cushioned from this because they are still on the lowest tariff and they will not be paying the basic charge of the 200 Rand that other customers will be subjected to.
Climate change poses a major threat to food security in Mozambique, with small-scale farmers, particularly women and the youth, struggling due to inadequate farming knowledge and lack of market access. This is according to Francisco Nahale, a country manager for global NGO Solidaridad, and the organization focuses on transforming supply chain in agriculture in more than 50 countries. The NGO, together with the Heineken Africa Foundation and various organizations, has launched a project promoting regenerative agriculture for sustainable livelihoods in Mozambique. Nahale says this program aims to improve climate resilience for more than 4,000 farmers in the country's capital, Maputo.
With focus of empowering at least 60% of women and 30% of youth. And we also expect to benefit or impact about 20,000 community members indirectly. This program will achieve this promoting regenerative agriculture practice by improving the soil health and crop yields.
In other news, the International Monetary Fund says it remains engaged with Senegal as the West African country's prime minister promised a recovery plan to clean up billions in debts that were not disclosed by the previous administration. The IMF, a key financier for the debt-laden country, froze disbursements on its program with Senegal last year after an audit under new president Bassirou Diomaye Faye found the previous administration had understated deficits. This pushed its end 2023 debt ratio to roughly 100% of GDP versus the previously reported 74%. Kenya's private sector activity slowed in June with its biggest contraction in close to a year, driven by slower consumer spending and the impact of protests during the month. The Stanbic Bank Kenya Purchasing Managers Index fell to 48.6 from 49.6 in May. Readings above the 50.0 mark indicate expansion in business activity, while those below show contraction. The contraction was the sharpest in 11 months. Let's have a look at financial indicators at this hour. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 532. In Botswana, 13 pula 14. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 47. Zambia, 23 kwacha 96. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 riel 45. Russia, 78 rubles 72. India, 85 rupees 63. China, 7 yuan 16. South Africa, 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,355, platinum at $1,404 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $68.50 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa. No time to waste. Be on the move with Benjamin Moshatama and Palesa. Africa in Business, 4 till 5 p.m., 5 till 6. We put on a little bit more color. Vue d'Afrique with Joël Moteba. We go to East and Central Africa and find Darubinia Africa with I Am Shakif. Madapiri gives us some life. Zochitika Ada. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent. African led, African run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices. English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa, because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there.
Oh, this is Bien featuring Adekunle Gold and Shine TTW. This one is titled Wahala. And you know what? We're having a good time, both with the conversations, but also with the music of the African continent. 11:48 Central Africa time. We keep things moving and fun here on The Move.
Get set and be ready to go. On the Move with Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama. This Mandela Month, we honor his belief that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world.
Education is one of the most important weapons in a country.
Catch us on DSTV Bouquet 802. Step into the heart of the day on The Move with Palesa and Benjamin. Through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph, not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa, because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa, because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform.
And vibes on this one. Diamond of Guijo and Azul Serene coming through with this one. A collaboration, one titled Uzozi Sola. Yeah.
Those guys crack me up in the background.
Right. There's so much happening in the song. All right, we're about to wrap things up. It's been a beautiful day and great conversations have been taking place. Don't forget that you can always catch up on the conversations on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za. If you forgot what the conversations were all about, I'm sure you didn't, but hey, if you did, here's what we spoke about today. We spoke about hostile architecture in the first hour of the show. That was quite interesting to see how our cities are changing.
Concerning as well.
Concerning, very concerning, right? And then we went into our becoming feature, speaking about initiation rites. Very, very intriguing.
That was
there.
fun.
That was very, very fun. And then, of course, on our family and parenting corner, we spoke about motherhood loneliness.
That was educational.
It was.
I'm giving you a response for everything.
Well, we're about to say goodbye. And, of course, we'll bring in Lulu Gabu to let us know what's coming up on the Africa Update. That comes up after this show from 12 to 1 p.m. Central Africa time. So stay with us here on Channel Africa. There's more to come. And, of course, informative, intriguing, educational, and all the other phrases that you can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow is more of a fun Friday. This is when we just take off our brains and take hold of our hearts, and we really celebrate the cultural economy of the African continent, and we love the creative dynamic that comes into our Fridays. But hey, man, let's take a break. Lulu Kapu is just coming. We'll let you know just after the short break what's coming up on the Africa Update.
This Mandela Month, we honor his belief that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world.
Education is one of the most important weapons in a country.
Catch us on DSTV Bouquet 802. Benjamin Moshatama and Palesa on the move.
All right, it's 11:55. Lulu is here to let us know what's coming up on the Africa Update today. Good morning, Lulu.
Good morning.
You and I are literally matching to the T today. We're wearing Polynecks, wearing both black leather jackets, wide leg jeans, and Adidas.
Yeah.
And sneakers. Well, I can't say. Oh, no, goodness.
Oh, and Benji as well.
Ben as well.
He looks like he's coming from those, those music videos. From
yes, old
the
school.
70s,
yes,
70s,
like In Living Color.
Oh, yeah.
You remember?
Definitely. All right, so it is a happy Thursday. It's a bit warm. They said there's a cold front, but yeah.
Really? You think it's warm?
It's slightly warmer than yesterday. Well, the sun is out. So
now, yes, yeah.
All right, so today we're going to be looking at a number of stories, but the big one being Gabon's former president, Ali Bongo, facing questions by two investigative judges in France.
Mm-hmm.
What will come out from those, from that investigation? It's going to be quite interesting, and I guess the people of Gabon also are watching this very closely, as the rest of the continent will be. And then a growing number of young South African children are developing serious health conditions due to obesity.
Wow.
Obesity is a challenge. It's Yeah.
What are children eating right now?
It's all the junk food.
Yeah.
Children are not eating how we used to eat.
Yeah. Also, the cost of living is higher, making healthy food more expensive.
Yeah. But it's junk food and just the wrong foods. And some kids are not even getting any exercise.
True.
You go to schools and you find that there's some children that don't partake in any PE, physical activity.
And some schools don't even have them. Some schools don't have functional playgrounds. The facilities.
Yeah, so it's something that we will be unpacking on Africa Update today. And very quickly, we're going to be speaking to our correspondent in Nigeria, Collins Nusa Adohengbe, with regards to some weekly markets in Nigeria's Yobe state having been closed due to a resurgence of attacks by suspected Boko Haram insurgents. It's an ongoing issue in Nigeria, and we'll unpack this with Collins.
All right, thank you, Lulu. That's the Africa Update coming up in the next hour from 12 to 1 p.m. Central Africa time. So stay with us right here on Channel Africa. From us, the On The Move team, we're saying goodbye, and we'll be back tomorrow, leaving you with this one titled God S, featuring Ruga. Goodbye.
It's an opportunity with 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle. We deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future.